Good morning, my friends. All right, let's talk about the science of going up in weight class and speed, reflexes, attributes of combat. Again, this is for a particular crowd, but also for anyone who will find it useful. Okay, so we talked about power to weight ratio, we talked about reflexes. Now let's talk about a slightly different take on this. Let's talk about offense. All right. So, aside from the weight that you'll be carrying and the power and possible limb speed that you'll be gaining if you train this properly, let's talk about offense, because it will affect your offense. You are going to be able to hit harder, but will you be slower? Again, your limb speed will not be affected if you train properly. For example, if you make sure that you don't overtrain your biceps and lats, your pulling muscles, so that they're too tense or perhaps even too overdeveloped. It's really hard to do if you're doing a fighter's training regimen, right? But the overall bulk, however many pounds that is, will affect your footwork speed, your traveling speed, so to speak, right? Remember, if you're doing most combat martial arts, you have a lead and a front. A little bit less applicable to grappling. Things like judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu rounds start off on the ground. And they're not as oriented towards speed, although there are moments in that. I may cover that. Alright, so your offense. I always say, if you're trained properly, if you know what you're doing in any sport, martial art, for example, your front leg and your front hand are your primary weapons. You've got your jab, your back fist, your lead hook, your inverted long uppercut or inverted jab. In Taekwondo, we used to call this an upset punch, right? If you're doing MMA, conceivably you could lead with a lead hammer fist or a hammer fist that way, possibly a knife hand strike, right, or a palm strike. And in combat, your finger jab, which is the longest, most efficient attack weapon that you have, all right, because you can jab it in someone's eye, possibly to their throat. You could also flick your hand. So you've got attacking with that front limb, and then your front foot. Generally, whatever kick you're doing, front kick, skip, side kick, hook kick, roundhouse kick, teep, more of a push kick, heel thrust kick, even a lead knee. You can do it with a quick skip, a pendulum step. Or you could do it with a quick switch like they do in Taekwondo, or a slightly different skip you see in Muay Thai, right? But your front hand and your front leg are your primary attacking weapons. But know how to lead with a straight right, a straight palm, a back leg roundhouse kick, a back leg front kick, teep, even a back leg side kick, even a spinning back kick. They're not as efficient as attacks, but you must be able to do it and do it efficiently in order to be able to not become so predictable, right? So, will your offense be effective? Yes. First of all, what I recommend you do is introduce specialized footwork speed training. Let me say this again. Specialized footwork speed training. Again, something I don't see a lot of people doing. And how will you do that? All right. So first of all, if you have something like when you jab, you have a step drag. As you jab, your front foot moves with your jab, and then your rear foot catches up. Sometimes on impact, and sometimes a little bit behind impact, right? It's really important to drill that as a speed drill. I personally believe you will get more out of that even than sprints. And the reason why is that you are training the skill hopefully close to the conditions that you will when it's employed, when it's being used. All right, and you are pushing yourself, and then when you've done a few repetitions where you start to feel it, then you can do your sprints afterwards, right? One of the general principles of developing either speed or reflex is train it first. Train it first, train it first. Let me say it again, train it first. And then as you begin to achieve fatigue, what will happen is you will begin to lose some of your finesse, some of your ability to execute the move, at which point if you keep practicing it, then you may lose speed, you may lose efficiency, you may start doing things in an inefficient or wrong manner, and then you'll start reinforcing it with your repetitions, because it's possible to execute a technique, a move, a combination, a strategy correctly a lot less than it is to execute it over and over and over again wrong. All right, as fatigue sets in. So after that, you can take your break, and then you can do a sprint, and because there's a lot less going on in the body, right, you can give yourself adequate recovery time, and you can execute those sprints correctly and work those fast twitch muscles again, right? Another thing about offense is, if you are not a deceptive fighter that doesn't use feints, fakes, setups, combinations, and different strategies of attack, become that fighter. But don't become it too much. What do I mean? Become that fighter, but don't become it too much means if you don't use fakes, incorporate fakes. But don't introduce a ton of fakes, and don't try to just do so much faking that it becomes the focus of what you're doing, because you have a limited amount of time to train for an event, right? If you introduce 2 or 3 new fakes, and 2 or 3 level changes, if you're not a level change person, okay, if you're not an angular attack person, even if you're incorporating all of that, just 1 or 2 of each, and drill it to perfection, and drill it slow, and then drill it at speed, then drill it slow, then drill it at speed. What is that going to do, right? That's going to give you something you can use under pressure. Again, this particular group, you have a trainer that can do that can do it now, that can do it for future events, right? Since I have your eye and your ear, let me use it to help you and help my friend. A mutually beneficial relationship based on respect and benefit. So another thing is, in offense, it's the ability to capitalize on an opponent's mistake, right? For example, if an opponent gets tired and puts the hands down, that's the time to spring in with your really fast attack. And so although it's offensive, in a sense it's reactive. It's a reaction to an event that happened. And the ability to recognize that is the ability to score offensively. So your offensive speed and capabilities need not suffer if you're putting on extra pounds and of muscle, right? And your ability to execute continuous attacks over and over again, round after round, without fatiguing, right? Again, that has to do with your particular training in both anaerobic and aerobic. I take this info, I sort of always intuitively thought this made sense, but there's a bodybuilder named Dorian Yates. He was triumphant throughout the 90s and I think quite a bit of the early 2000s. And Dorian Yates always talked about, he was a big advocate of high intensity, low frequency, low rep training. But he said, he always got on the treadmill and he always did some walking before his training or after his training. He always included some form of cardio. And he said, your aerobic capacity and your aerobic recovery are tied into your anaerobic capacity and your anaerobic recovery, right? Your your body's ability to circulate blood, your body's ability to oxygenate is directly tied into your ability to recover. And what is most combat sport is what? Interval training. It's a combination of aerobic and anaerobic training, of fast twitch and slow twitch muscles, of stability and mobility, of offense and defense, and many things. It is truly yin and yang. And if you want to get deep, the 5 elements, which many people foolishly think of as just, these elements as described, earth, water, fire, so on, they're symbols, they're allegories of phases and changes of state, right? And I don't have time to delineate all of that. But finally, let's talk a little bit about grappling. This is for the general public, right? While grappling does not necessarily involve so much speed as stand-up striking arts and explosiveness, there will always be an explosive moment. First of all, if you're a young, strong competitor, I believe that this idea of pulling guard when the stand-up grappling gets a little bit difficult, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of taking your back. I think it's immoral in the sense that warriors throughout time have recognized when it comes to combat, excuse me, that taking to the ground and taking your back and letting the opponent get on top of you is suicide in most combat, right? When it comes to weapon-assisted grappling, which is really where grappling was used throughout most of history, it's suicide. And even if strikes are allowed, and if you're in a melee or something. Now, I understand, for example, Olympic wrestling in ancient Greco-Roman times was for a different purpose, more like what we do now as a sport, as a way of gaining honors and maybe settling issues without hurting anybody. But for me, that hasn't been my focus in martial art throughout my life. Number 2, I also, from watching lots of grappling, even Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu matches, it's just kind of easier to do stuff on the top, right? So, explosiveness helps in managing and gaining the takedown, and there's always a crucial moment in a grappling match. Let's say you're on the bottom, you're working from the guard, the person gives you an opportunity for an arm bar. It's not an infinite amount of time. You've got to get there quickly. So that's one thing. Number 2, doing explosive training, doing a high-intensity resistance training does what? Develops the fast twitch muscles, which are your power muscles, which are your strength muscles. And strength, for sure, counts in grappling, right? I've seen lots of fights in my time. I've seen skinny, short individuals in my high school fight big, tall guys and open up with a quick jab to the face, and then maybe another punch and a quick takedown, and that speed for sure compensated for their lack of strength and size. But if you're in a sporting match and things are by weight and age, your strength, your raw strength is going to be very important. If you're going to grapple over and over again in training, you're going to build up injuries if you don't have strength and a strong structure, right? So, in conclusion, the reflex training you do and the other training we talked about in my previous video will help you retain or improve your raw speed. Focusing a few drills on the offense again reinforces that. Being deceptive fighter that uses fakes and feints, uses odd angles, weird combinations, right? 1 or 2 will add an element of surprise to what you do, which again, if you find that you've lost some speed, will compensate for it and may even make you look faster, because speed ultimately is relative, right? if you are faster than the person you're fighting and normally you're considered slow, guess what? At that time, you're fast. All right. So y'all have a wonderful day, and be safe out there. It's really hot. I've heard in Europe thousands of people have succumbed to the heat wave and possibly died. So be safe out there, okay? Hydrate.